This is WRFR LP 93.3 FM Rockland, broadcasting also on W257BI 99.3 FM in Camden, and streaming on the web at WRFR.org. At WRFR, we are all volunteers. We invite you to join us in giving voice to the life and creativity of our Rockland-Camden area. WRFR is sponsored by over 80 local businesses. Each hour, we thank 4 of these sponsors. Please note who they are and let them know you appreciate their support for your local community radio station.
Rockland Marketplace, located at 25 Rankin Street, now offering a vast selection of home furnishings, home decorations, and antiques, with plenty of surprises when the new shipment comes in each week. Open daily 9 to 5. That's the Rockland Marketplace.
Rockland Savings Bank at 582 Main Street in Rockland and also in Waldoboro, providing a wide range of services for the banking needs of local residents. Rockland's local bank since 1888. Rockland Savings Bank is a member of the FDIC and is an equal housing lender. On the web, rocklandsavingsbank.com.
Rockport Charters. Enjoy Penobscot Bay aboard the lobster cruiser Harvest Moon, offering private charter services, island picnic trips, lighthouse tours, and island transportation all over Penobscot Bay region. Year-round service available. Go to rockportcharters.com, call or text 207-691-1066. Schooner Bay Taxi, locally owned and open 24 hours, serving Mid-Coast Maine for over 20 years. You can reserve a taxi for future time and location from their website. To get a taxi pronto, their phone is 594-5000, schoonerbaytaxi.com.
And we thank you for listening. To find out more about WRFR and how you can participate, go to our website at wrfr.org or give us a call at the station, 594-0721.
Hello. This is the Rockland Camden Area Community Calendar for Sunday, August 17th. It's the annual service of the Old South Cushing Baptist Church at 4 p.m. on the Salt Pond Road, which connects to 97 on Pleasant Point Road in Cushing. This year's guest preacher is the Reverend Edward Wynn with a homily called Keep Life Simple. It's Pedal to the Port 2014, the coastal bike ride to benefit trekkers at the American Legion Hall, so beware of bikers on Route 131 and around Port Clyde, Tennants Harbor area today. Electronic music by Quantum is from 1 to 3 p.m. at the Camden Amphitheater. Jason Dean and Mike Whitehead perform, and this is free. The Midcoast Community Band is having a concert from 2 to 4 p.m. at the Woolen Mill Park in Warren. There's an ice cream wagon. Bring chairs. Free Breakers Jazz Band concert is at 4 p.m. at the Sail Power and Steam Museum in Rockland. Marlene Hall and the band play jazz waterside. Bring a picnic. And it's the 12th annual John Serrett Lobster Bake from 4 to 7 p.m. Rain or shine at a waterfront home in Owl's Head. The primary fundraiser for the Knox County Democratic Committee. Buy tickets at 594-9263. And Monty Python Live, mostly, is in Rockland at 5:30 at the Strand Theater. Also, By the Bay Jazz Trio is at the Quarry Tavern, at the East Wind Inn in Tennants Harbor from 6 to 9 p.m. And if you'd like to know more about what's going on around here, you know where to go. Visit wrfr.org.
As people of the Earth Tribe.
afternoon. This is Gary Wheeler, and you have entered the zone of high strangeness, a place where the unbelievable is believed until proven otherwise. As I'm sure you know, the theme song was from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, written by John Williams. And one of the favorite parts of the movie where the computers talk to each other, the ETs and the Earth people's computers get in rhythm and communicate. I love that part of the movie. Welcome to a new time slot for High Strangeness. It's now at 4 o'clock this time every Sunday, moving from Wednesday evening to now. A little better for my brain. It's a little more flexible this time of day than at 8 o'clock at night. And we have a good show tonight, but first I'd like to give birthday shout-outs to Carol and Celia Rose, both of which who had birthdays this weekend. Happy birthday, ladies, and may you have many more, as much fun as you had this weekend, as I know you had. As usual, I will be taking phone calls this evening. The number to call is 207-593-0013. Some of the show is pre-recorded, but I will break in when a call comes. A few phone rules, since we are dealing with a controversial subject, or so I'm told. First of all, no full names, just first name or anonymous is fine. Of course, no questionable language. Try to limit the calls to 10 minutes. And again, the number is 593-0013. Especially interested in callers who have had a UFO sighting or experience, or have heard of one by a friend or a neighbor. Also, people who have strong opinions about the whole UFO issue, either for or against. I'd be willing to talk to anybody who has a strong feeling. Also, a few FYI heads-up notices. As always, keep your eye to the goings-on in Britain with the crop circles, probably the sleeping giant about all of UFO history is the making of these circles, which is a form of communication to us here. This is the season for it because the crops are at that point where they can be bent over. And it's very interesting and very illuminating to look at these beautiful geometric figures that are created. The best site to go to see this on the internet is www.ccdb.ws, which is a database basically of photographs of recent ones as well as the past ones in the last few years. Also, you photo buffs, as I remind you every week, keep an eye on your photos when you print them or when you look at them on your computers, because your camera is capable of picking up some UV and infrared frequencies that we do not see, and many people pick up different images when they're looking at it after the picture has been taken, images that they haven't seen before they took the photograph. Especially when there's thunderstorms around, point your camera up there and just shoot, and you might be surprised at what you catch. Often people do find UFOs in the pictures. Another reminder about the conference, that's September 6th to 7th. It's UFO experiencers and abductees will be speaking at the Clarion Hotel in Portland, Maine. It's put on by Starborn Support and Northeast UFO Conferences. The number for information is 774-766-2558. And one of the Allagash abductees, Jim Weiner, will be speaking at that event. And of course, the Allagash 4 is an abduction event that took place here in Maine back in the late 60s. Also, I'd like to take this moment to thank my sponsors, Diverse Landscapes here in Rockland, and Eric Best, who's an author and business consultant. I appreciate their support. You are listening to High Strangeness on WRFR 93.3 FM, Rockland, and 99.3 FM, Camden. And it is streaming on WRFR.org. I have a phone call coming in right now, and I'll go ahead and answer it and put it on the air. Hello, caller. You're on WRFR Live.
Hi, Gary.
Hi. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. I just called to tell you about a UFO that I saw back in the 70s.
Oh, great. And where were you located when you saw that?
It was outside of Indianapolis, out in the country. We lived out in the country. And the object was flying over our house. It flew very low at first, and then it would come circle around and fly over again and a little bit higher. And each time it came over, it was a little bit higher, and it was triangular shape.
Uh-huh.
And it had on the one of the had a bright white light, and then there were two colored lights, and I don't really remember what the colored lights were.
Right.
I'm thinking one was blue and red, one was red, but I'm not sure. And it flew over several times, and we called some people who live a couple of miles away, and they came, and so it was still coming over, but each time it came over, it was a little higher and a little higher. So I would say it went on for, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 minutes, maybe. And then it just went so high that it just sort of stopped in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And then other lights, just like theirs, the one bright light came, and there were, I don't know, I would say 10, 12, and then all of a sudden they just and disappeared.
Oh. You seem to remember that pretty well.
Oh, I do. Oh, yeah. It was a long time ago, but I certainly remember it very well. It was very interesting. I was a photographer at the time, or I still am, but I didn't even think about taking a picture.
Right. That's often the case.
And it made no sound. It just went, just like it was floating over, and it made no sound. And I didn't feel, we were just very, very curious and interested.
So you weren't afraid at all?
No.
No fear.
Not at all.
And did the object always appear solid, or did it kind of fade in and out?
No, it always appeared the same, but but you could see through the middle of it, like it was almost like three silver pipes, with lights on each end, and you could see through the middle.
Right.
But it didn't fade. It just kept going up higher and higher as it would sweep around and past our house again. And but we could always see it until it got so high that all we could see was the bright light.
Wow.
And at that same time, a couple of days later, a woman who lived, I don't know, I'd say maybe half a mile away, was in the second story of her house in bed. And she said that it was like a car headlight was in her window.
Wow.
And she thought, well, that car is, shining in my bedroom. And then she thought, oh, wait a minute, I'm on the second floor,
Right.
And so she just thought it was strange. And I don't think, she was particularly scared, but she just thought it was strange. And she mentioned it when we saw her. And then we told her what we had seen. And she said, well, maybe that was it, but
that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a good one. Did that experience make you feel one way or another about the whole existence of ETs as a possibility here on Earth?
Well, I don't think that it did one way or the other because, I think maybe we were always a little open to it anyway.
Right.
And I think we thought that, we always, I think we always felt that there had to be something else around.
Right.
But we never even, it's not like we went out looking for, anything or for UFOs or anything.
Right. Even after the experience, do you find yourself looking up more often?
Well, yeah. Now after that, for a while, we thought, every time we saw a bright light, we thought, that was it. Right. But then, after a while, it just sort of faded. Then we moved from that house, but it just, it was not, something that was like unbelievable.
Right.
It was just something that was just very, very interesting, and something that just was just a curiosity, and we just thought it was just another learning experience,
right,
so to speak.
Pretty profound one, I would say.
It was very interesting.
Have you followed up at all in studying about the UFOs since that happened?
No, I really haven't. Okay. And I saw about the crop circles and things like that, but I haven't really done anything.
Well, keep looking up.
Okay.
Yeah, and take that camera with you and shoot it once in a while. You just might be surprised.
You would think I would have done that, and I just didn't even think about it.
It's many people report exactly the same thing. I don't know if it's a definitive interference from the craft or what, but they don't seem to have a memory of what is available to them to use at the moment that it happens, and they just sort of freeze, a little bit.
Well, and we had plenty of time.
Yeah, that's right. You did. Yeah, you saw it for a long time.
Yeah, we had plenty of time, and we could have done that. And it didn't even cross my mind. And plus, I didn't want to miss anything either. So I didn't want to go in and get it. I just didn't even think about it. But it would have been interesting. It would have been interesting if I had gotten the camera out.
Well, it would have. Yeah, away. Of course, the problem with the camera is the resolution gets so small when you're shooting something far away that. Yeah, a lot of the pictures that are taken, you just see little dots. It's hard to convince anybody you actually saw something.
Well, this was so close.
Yeah, well, that's true.
This was so close that you ducked.
Yeah?
It felt like it was going to.
That is close.
It was so close. Yeah, you kind of felt like it was really. We knew the roof was on the house, so it had to be higher than the roof. But you kind of ducked because it was very, very close.
Well, it's a great experience, and I appreciate you calling.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, that's a pretty profound experience she had. The disc shape seems to be the most common shape that's seen, but often back in the 60s and 70s, they were also seen a lot of triangles, both in the United States and in Europe, especially around Belgium. They had a whole series of triangles that were seen and photographed in Belgium. Oh, sorry. That was the phone that I forgot to shut off. Sorry about that. I'll continue now. Tonight, we're going to do kind of an interesting couple of audios that have to do with the UFOs. Actually, another phone call. Hello, you're on WRFR, Gary Wheeler. Go ahead, please. Oh, nobody there. Okay, I'll get back to this. A couple of audios about UFOs shutting down our nuclear missiles and our nuclear weapons. This happened back in the 60s, but there has been several incidences since the 60s. And the first audio is going to be an interview with a man named Robert Salas, who was one of the men who worked in the silos at the missile base in Maelstrom, Montana, back in 1967, when the missiles were literally turned off. At the end of this audio, you'll hear some questions being asked by reporters, and he'll be responding to those questions. Okay, I'll put that on.
At that time, I was a first lieutenant, U.S. Air Force stationed at Malcolm Air Force Base, Montana. I was trained and assigned duties as a missile launch officer for the Minuteman I intercontinental ballistic missile. I was designated Deputy Missile Combat Crew Commander and part of a two-man crew. My commander at that time was Lieutenant Frederick Meinwald. He's now deceased. We were on duty inside the Oscar Launch Control Center.
I have another caller on the line. You're on WRFR. Caller.
Hello, this is Victoria.
Hi, Victoria. How are you?
Good, Gary.
Yeah, thank you for calling.
Well, I was just wondering if you could explain to the listeners if you've had any of your own experiences.
Yes, I have, Victoria. Thank you for asking. I've had a couple. I won't go into great detail, but I've had a couple events happen in my earlier life when I was younger that I could never quite explain. And years later, I read the book by John Mack called Abductions. And in that book, I saw several experiences, I read them, that were pretty typical of things that happened to me. One of which was in San Francisco. And one evening when I was right before sleep, I found myself kind of floating and seeing an orb in the sky, which had a color that I had never seen before. It was just a gorgeous color. And I remember going up, feeling like I was being pulled up or I was climbing stairs. And I do remember seeing some faces that were very smoky. I couldn't really define the features. I was also extremely ecstatic. I was very elated during the whole experience. And I do remember that all my memories were uploaded. I had the experience of basically seeing everything that had happened in my life up until that point, flashing by at extreme speeds. And but the really phenomenal thing was, as fast as it went by, I could feel everything that was happening. And not only could I feel myself, I could feel the other people that I was interacting with. So that was pretty profound. But after the experience, like so many experiences we have in life, I just put it off as some sort of epiphany that I couldn't really ever explain. And of course, you try to explain things within the dimension that you know. So my explanation was, well, the thing I saw was actually probably the sun, but it didn't make any sense because I could look right at it. And I was probably going upstairs, but I knew that wasn't true because it didn't feel like that at all. And the whole experience, I couldn't really at all get my hands around until I read John Mack's book and read about somebody having the exact experience. And I got so excited, I went on the internet and looked at all these photographs of UFOs until I found one that was exactly what I saw. So that's when my whole thing started about my interest in UFOs.
Well, and how old were you?
Well, at that time I was, 52.
52.
Yeah, I was old. And older.
Well, Gary, you're a fascinating man, and I thank you for relating that story.
Yeah, and thank you. Have you had any experiences yourself, or?
No.
Okay.
I don't. I mean, I just don't.
Okay, that's fine.
But I have paranormal, my story about the cat in the orb over the grave. That's
you want to mention
nother.
that? You want to tell that story, or you want to?
Well, it still kind of haunts me today, but it just happened a week and a half ago, and I'm still not over it. But my favorite cat passed away. I buried him in my pet cemetery, and I think it was 2 nights later I went down to photograph the gravesite in the dark. I took 3 pictures with my little Canon flash camera, saw nothing, but then when I brought it into the light, I looked, and the 3rd picture had a very nicely shaped orb above the grave. So I felt that he was still there.
And when you looked later, you didn't see it either, huh?
No.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that picture, and it's very profound. I mean, there's just no
really
doubt.
Is.
There's no way you're going to look at that and interpret it as something else.
Oh, but the non-believers have.
Oh, well, of course.
So,
the debunkers.
I'll never show them anything again.
No, I know. No, it's true. And you really it brings you down,
It does.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Gary.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Victoria.
We'll be talking again soon.
We certainly will. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That was very interesting. Victoria's a good friend. And I'll get back to that tape again. Again, this is Robert Salas talking about missiles being shut down in Montana.
A concrete capsule located about 60 feet underground. We had operational control over 10 Minuteman nuclear missiles. Each missile operates independently and has its own source of primary and backup power systems. It is important for you to note that the command and control for these missiles was entirely located within the capsule. There was absolutely no means to affect any of the missile systems from outside the capsule. On the evening of March 24, 1967, while my commander was on a scheduled rest break, I received the first of 2 phone calls from my topside flight security controller, FSC. The first call was to report unidentified lighted objects flying above the facility. Minutes later, the FSC phoned again and reported in a very agitated state that there was a large oval-shaped object hovering above the front gate. It was a red, pulsating, lighted object, approximately 30 to 40 feet in diameter. The best he could describe it. It was difficult to distinguish a structural part of it on the inside, except it was a glowing red, pulsating object. He had all the men out there with their weapons drawn. He wanted me to tell him what to do next. I, of course, told him something like, make sure nothing comes inside the perimeter fence. As I started to inform my commander, our missiles began to shut down. We lost alert status on all 10 missiles while this object was above our facility. When we queried the fault system, all missiles reported guidance and control system failure. At that time, the FSC reported to me that the object had flown off at high speed. When the security alert team arrived at the affected LS, and I'll read LS meaning launch facilities, they reported seeing the object hovering over those sites. As they approached closer to the object, they lost all communications with the FSC. After speaking to the wing command post, Lieutenant Marlowe informed me that the same thing happened at another flight. At that time, I assumed that meant that night, but it turns out what he meant was it happened at another flight about a week earlier. They reported that the objects were above them, and at that point the missiles started shutting down, disabled. Recently, let's say 2010, there was a shutdown of 50 missiles at Francis D. Warren Air Force Base. This was announced by the Air Force. It was announced that there was eventually announced there was a computer glitch. Now, I'm very worried about that. I'm not sure I believe that, but we do have witnesses that have come forward, both civilian and Air Force, that said they saw an object in the sky at the time of the shutdowns. This is still being investigated, but these incidents are still going on. These objects know in great detail how our missiles operate.
They know ours, but we don't know theirs.
That's right. And they can shut down our missiles at any time. They've proven that. They know in great detail how they operate. And so, if you release that information to the public, what do you say then about, what kind of defense do we have against these things?
The greatest thing that's happened is more people have come forward. You heard Bruce Festermacher and Mr. Schindel say that as a result of my appearing on public broadcasting programs, they decided to go ahead and come out. So, again, if there are others out there that want to come forward and feel they can, deal with this, because there is still a ridicule factor involved, it's going to help this, disclosure eventually.
And you had 30 years to reflect on the incidents of what occurred that day. And do you believe that it's an extraterrestrial presence that's causing that?
Yes, definitely not of this earth, because of the way it flew I was an aircraft certification engineer for over 22 years. I worked for FAA and was an Air Force. The way it flew and the way it was able to shut down the missiles in a very specific way by sending a very specific signal to each of the missiles.
Have you ever seen anything like that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't even imagine that something like that we would have today if it was ours in some way. Otherwise, we wouldn't worry about other people having nuclear weapons. We could just shut them down anytime we wanted to.
Have you ever feared reprisal for coming out, sharing the story, almost gathering troops, and thinking that either the Air Force or any other body would try to further suppress your story?
It's been on my mind. I've got to admit, there's always the possibility that there could be reprisals against me officially, but I have persevered, I've fought through that, and continue to talk about it.
All right, that's Robert Salas, who speaks about this at the various opportunities that he has to be questioned about it. It's quite phenomenal, when you think about it, that the whole nuclear weapons thing could all be bogus, basically, since this particular thing happened in the 60s, showing that the ETs literally could control our nuclear weapons, which basically would say, give it up, boys. We're not going to let you use these things, so don't keep pretending or keep making them. Pretty phenomenal when you think about it, and also pretty phenomenal that the public wasn't made aware that this is the case. Now, this next audio by a man named Robert Jacobs, who was a photographer for the Army, I believe, and who photographed ICBM missiles as they were launched and as they went into space. And he actually witnessed a UFO when he saw the film at a later time, a UFO dismantling a warhead that was on an ICBM, even though it wasn't activated with a nuclear weapon. It was taken off by the UFO. Here, I'll play that now.
That photo squadron. And as such, it was my duty to supervise the instrumentation photography of every missile that went down the Western Test Range. In those days, we called them ICBMs, inter-county ballistic missiles, because most of them blew up on launch. And our job was to determine why they blew up, to provide the engineers good enough engineering sequential photography so that they could see what was wrong with the bird as it took off in flight. What we photographed up there affected me for the rest of my life and made a huge impact on my understanding of the universe and of governmental manipulation of our minds. The purpose of them was they were ballistic missiles. They were to deliver nuclear weapons on targets. That's what they were there for. We weren't launching real nuclear weapons. We were launching dummy warheads. They were the exact size, shape, and dimension and weight of a nuclear warhead. For my stunning achievement in finding a place where I could look back at Vandenberg Air Force Base from up north, and for figuring out how to transmit the timing up there, and for getting the thing set up, I was awarded the Air Force Guided Missile Insignia. I was the first photographic officer in the Air Force to get they called it the missile badge. It was a highly coveted thing at the time. It was definitely in 1964, because Florence Mansman confirmed that, and he knew. He had written it down and knew the exact date of it. They counted down the missile. We heard engine ignition, lift off. We knew the missile was underway. And we were looking down southwest, and the missile popped up through the fog. It was just beautiful. And I hollered, "There it is." And our guys on our M45 tracking mount with 180-inch lenses on it got it. And the big BU telescope swung over and got it, and we followed the thing, and sure enough, we could see all three stages of powered flight as they burned out and dropped away. And then, of course, to our naked eye, all we saw was a smoke trail going off into subspace as it headed off toward its target, which was Eniwetok Island, Eniwetok Atoll. So we whooped and shouted and heard the film wrap off in the BU telescope, and figured, well, that was our first big deal, and we got it. We sent the film back down to Vandenberg, and I don't know exactly how long it was after the event. It might have been a day or two. I was called into Major Mansman's office at the 1st Strategic Aerospace Division headquarters. And I walked into his office, and they had a screen and a 16-millimeter projector set up. There was a couch, and Major Mansman said, "Sit down," and there were two guys, as I recall, two guys in gray suits, civilian clothes, which was fairly unusual. Major Mansman said, "Watch this," and turned on the film projector. And I watched the screen, and there was the launch from the day or two before at Big Sur. It was quite exciting because of the length of the telescope. As the Atlas missile entered the frame, we could see the whole third stage, which has two rocket nozzles like this and one in the center, a gimbaled one in the center, filling our frame from about 160 miles. That was pretty exciting optics. We watched that stage burn out. We watched the second stage burn out. We watched the third stage burn out. And into the frame came something else. It flew into the frame like this, and it shot a beam of light at the warhead, which is represented by my thumb here. Now, remember, all this stuff is flying at several thousand miles an hour. So this thing fires a beam of light at the warhead, hits it, and then this thing flies up like this. Meanwhile, we're all going like this, fires another beam of light, goes around like this, we're going like this, fires another beam of light, goes down like this, fires another beam of light, and then flies out the way it came in. And the warhead tumbles out of outer space. Now, I saw that. I don't give a goddamn what anybody else says about it. I saw that on film. Phil Klass can kiss my ass. He wasn't there. I was. Now, when the lights came on, Major Mansman turned around and looked at me and said, "Were you guys screwing around up there?" And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "What was that?" And I said, "It looks to me like we got a UFO." Now, the thing that we saw, this object that flew in, was circular, was shaped like two saucers cupped like this with a ping pong ball on top. The beam of light came out of the ping pong ball. That's what I saw on film. Now, Major Mansman said to me, after some discussion about it, he said, "You are never to speak of this again. As far as you're concerned, this never happened." And I said, "Well?" And he said, "I don't need to emphasize the dire consequences of a security breach, do I?" And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "Fine, this never happened." And so I started for the door. He said, "Wait a minute." He said, "Years from now, if you're ever forced by someone to talk about this, you are to tell them it was laser strikes, laser tracking strikes." Well, in 1964, we didn't have any laser tracking strikes. We didn't have any laser tracking at all. Lasers were in their infancy in 1964. They were little playthings in laboratories. So I said, "Yes, sir," and walked out, and that was the last I talked about it for 18 years. I didn't talk about it to anybody at Vandenberg Air Force Base. Nobody in my squadron knew about it. Nobody saw the film but me. My commanding officer, Major Lewis S. Clement, Jr., didn't see it. My operations officer, Captain Kenneth R. Callahan, didn't see it. His assistant, Lieutenant Ronald O. Baylor, didn't see it. Their assistant, Chief Warrant Officer Guy M. Spooner, didn't see it. Nobody in my squadron saw it, and I didn't talk about it to anybody under direct orders from Major Florence J. Mansman, Jr. Consequently, no one at Vandenberg that I know of knows anything about this. That sounds real suspicious, doesn't it? Somebody should have seen it. Somebody should have talked about it. Well, they didn't. Because in those days, I didn't talk about top secret things that I was told not to talk about. There are things that I know about that I did in the service that I won't talk about to you now because they're top secret, and I could get my ass in trouble for talking about them. After 18 years, it occurred to me that I could talk about this one incident because nobody ever told me it was classified top secret. If you parse what Major Mansman said, he said, "You are to say this never happened." Well, that's not classifying it top secret, is it? Didn't happen to anybody else. It's not a second-hand story. This happened to me. And I was a part of a United States Air Force cover-up for 18 years. The object, the points of light that we saw, the warhead and so forth, were traveling through subspace about 60 miles straight up. And they were going somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 to 14,000 miles an hour when this thing caught up to them, flew in, flew around them, went like this, and flew back out. Everything was going about between 11 and 14,000 miles an hour that way. It was saucer-shaped, it was circular and rounded on the top and bottom, and it had a little dome right straight in the center of it, from which this beam emitted. After that article hit, the shit hit the fan. I started being harassed at work. I started by odd telephone calls that would come during the day. At night at my house, I would get telephone calls all night long, sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, midnight, 10 o'clock. People would call and start screaming at me. "You're going down!" Screaming at until I finally hung up the phone. One night somebody blew up my mailbox by putting a big load of skyrockets in it. The mailbox went up in flames. And that night at 1 o'clock in the morning the phone rang. I picked it up and somebody said, "Skyrockets in your box at night. Oh, what a beautiful sight." And things like that have happened on and off since 1982. I told you that since this History Channel thing came up, and since you've started asking questions, and obviously this thing is in the wind again, I'm starting to get telephone calls again. My wife and I get phone calls out here in Nowhere, Illinois, where we've retreated out to our farm. And
what have some of the recent calls been? What have they been saying?
They don't say anything. They simply, you pick up the phone and say, "Hello, hello," and there's a click. It's disconcerting.
Yeah.
But I've learned to not give a flip. I just don't care anymore. What are they going to do, kill me? What are they going to do, discredit me? Are they going to do any more than Philip Klass has already done to me? Are they going to make me look foolish? That's about all they can do. I believe, it's a belief system of mine, that this nutty fringe around UFOs is part of the sort of concerted effort to keep serious study of it down. Anytime anybody tries to study this subject seriously, we're subject to ridicule. I'm a full professor at a relatively major university, and I'm certain that my colleagues at the university laugh at me and hoot and holler behind my back when they hear that I have an interest in studying unidentified flying objects. And that's just one of the things that we have to live with. So was I in the Air Force? The Air Force denied it. Was I ever at Vandenberg? Well, of course I couldn't, because I wasn't in the Air Force. How could I have been at Vandenberg? Did I put a tracking site at Big Sur, California? No, there was no tracking site at Big Sur, California, which is a crock. The tracking site at Big Sur, California is still there right where I put it, and they use it to show you every time the space shuttle lands in California, that's where you first see it from. And they're still photographing missiles from Vandenberg from that tracking site. At any rate, to corroborate my story, Lee Graham tracked down Florence J. Mansman Jr., the same major who had ordered me to shut up about it. He was now a PhD from Stanford in nuclear physics, I think. I'm not sure what his background was, but it was a PhD from Stanford, and a rancher in Fresno, California. And he wrote to Lee back saying, "Everything Bob said in his story is absolutely true." He corroborated my story. And he continued to do that year after year. Every time somebody brought it up, every time somebody would contact him, he corroborated my story by saying, "Yes, that's exactly what happened." It takes a lot of guts to do that. I became a fan of Sonny's. He's now deceased. He was my hero for a while. I wasn't in the room at the time, but what happened to the film is an interesting story in itself, as Major Mansman told me and other people. Sometime after I had gone, there were guys in civilian clothes, and he said there were 3 of them. I remembered 2. He said there were 3 people from this agency, and I thought it was the CIA. He said no, it wasn't the CIA, it was somebody else, and I never did find out who it was. He said what happened is this. They took the film and they spooled off the part that had the UFO on it, and they took a pair of scissors and cut it off. They put that on a separate reel, they put it in their briefcase, they handed Major Mansman back the rest of the film and said, "Here, I don't need to remind you, Major Mansman, of the severity of a security breach. We'll consider this incident closed." And they walked off with the film. Major Mansman never saw it again, and as far as I'm concerned, nobody else ever saw it again, certainly not at Vandenberg. I'm certain that it left Vandenberg and went somewhere else. Major Mansman, who's a very good reader of film, said that the feeling at the time was that it must have been extraterrestrial. That they assumed that the beam of light that struck the warhead, the dummy warhead, was some sort of plasma beam, because it looked like a plasma beam. And they were assuming that it was something like that. Major Florence J. Mansman was a man of great honor and great scientific standing in the community. For him to corroborate it was good enough for me. Even if I didn't believe myself, I would believe Major Mansman. Now there were two of us who were Air Force officers at the time, and we saw something, and we both corroborated with each other that we saw that's what we recall from the incident. And what I have to ask skeptics, or people who disbelieve what I'm saying, is why would I make this up? Why would Major Florence J. Mansman, Dr. Major Florence J. Mansman, why would he make it up? What have we to gain? I've made no money from this. I've got nothing but pain and suffering out of talking about it. I've been harassed at my home. This was used against me partially in losing a job once in teaching. I've had a hell of a time after I've told this story, but I continue to tell the story because I think it's important for people to understand that this sort of shit goes on in the government. That the government covers up information that we are entitled to know about as citizens of this country. That's why I tell my story. That's why I'm telling it to you. And I'll continue to tell it as long as I'm alive, and I'll always tell it the same way because it only happened one way. I never vary the story because I can't. It's the truth. And I've been the subject of humiliating letters and phone calls from skeptics like James Oberg at NASA and Philip J. Klass, who's an idiot, a paid informant of the United States government, who persist in belittling me, and that's fine if they want to belittle me. But don't belittle Sonny Mansman. The things that were denied specifically, first of all, was that I was ever in the Air Force. They had no record of me. I was at Vandenberg. No, they had no record of that. Once we found, he was at Vandenberg. Well, he was never at Big Sur because we don't have a tracking site at Big Sur. Well, we proved that. That's the nature of bureaucratic idiocy. The Air Force's position right now is there was no such incident and there was no film of it. The thing that's important to me about this whole operation is very simply the biggest event in the history of humankind is the discovery that we are not alone. That there are other living entities, intelligent entities, in this universe or other universes, and that we aren't here alone. That's a huge, enormous discovery. It's the discovery of the lifetime of humankind, isn't it? To find out that we're not here alone. That's why I think it's important to talk about these things. I think that's exciting. And I think that it's important for us as humans to come to terms, to grow up, Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, to grow up and recognize that we may not be the paragon of animals after all. That there may be something out there that's bigger and more exciting than we are, and that just maybe, they're telling us something. Now, what I saw that day was something shooting down a dummy nuclear warhead. What message would I interpret from that? Don't mess with nuclear warheads. That's probably the message I would interpret from that. I'd say, oh, well, maybe somebody doesn't want us annihilating Moscow. Maybe we should stop doing that. I'm not sure that's what went on. But Ronald Reagan one night went on television and did a most astonishing thing. Most astonishing. He stood up in front of America and said, we're going to build a defensive shield. We're going to call it SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative. And its mission is going to be to protect us, to protect all of us. He said, Ronald Reagan said, we're going to share this with everybody. We're going to share it with the Russians. Ooh, our enemies. The guys that only a few years ago we were pretending to annihilate. Oh, suddenly we're going to protect them with a shield. From whom are we going to protect them? I just find some interesting patterns in life, and that's one of the patterns that I thought might be important. Perhaps that was the first shot across the bow, the first warning shot from somebody saying, knock this off, kid. It's time to grow up. You don't want to annihilate this planet, do you? Could be. My take on what happened there is based on not only my own speculation, but having read other things and talked to other people over the intervening years, that maybe the whole thing had something to do with a preview of the Strategic Defense Initiative for Star Wars. It's another possibility, I suppose. If you agree that perhaps our paranoia is unfounded, and if we encounter beings with superior technologies, maybe we should embrace them and be nice to them because they might be showing us how to survive.
I think that's one of the most profound audios I've listened to. His sincerity and his intellect and his ability to communicate his experience, I think, says a lot for his integrity of the man. And it was an amazing experience. And, of course, he's isolated because he's one of the few who saw it and the only one that came forward. And what he says at the end about how he interprets what it means that they were doing this. And, of course, the same is true as with the missiles. It gives me a ray of hope, to tell you the truth, that somehow we are a bit being watched over so we don't totally screw ourselves with messing with that kind of energy. And also to the intimidation that he experienced. A lot of people kind of poo-poo that. Philip Glass, he talks about, was a well-known debunker at that time and writer who basically always would say that people who saw UFOs were either well-intentioned but just mistaken in their observations in 99% of the time, and he said the other 1% were just frauds. So he gave no room whatsoever for any possibility that people who had these experiences had any validity whatsoever. And interestingly enough, this is a little town in Maine, Rockland, and I taught a course over the winter about UFOs, and we had about 10 or 12 classes, went on for several weeks. And one night I was home, and about 7 o'clock, and I have a cell phone, but literally almost nobody has that cell phone number. I just have it kind of for emergencies. And I got a call on the cell phone, and a male voice, somewhat mechanical, said, "Is this Gary?" And I said, "Yes." And then there was a pause, and then he said, "Are you talking with the aliens?" And I sort of laughed, thinking it was kind of a fun crank call. And I said, "Well, not exactly." And then there was silence again, and then the voice said, "You should stop that." And that was all, and then hung up. And now there was no number, return number on my cell phone. There was no way to call back a number. Again, nobody had that number. And the whole thing just sort of left me dumbfounded, sitting there. I didn't feel really afraid, but at the same time, I was just curious why doing such a minimal thing, teaching people about the possibility of the UFO experience and the history of it, and playing them videos and audios about it, would bring about this kind of response from whoever it was, and who knows who it was. But it's evident that this is one of those subjects that brings out the intimidation factor. I was listening to a Chinese teenager being questioned about the Tiananmen Square incident in China and how the Chinese government deals with it by pretending it didn't exist. And the reporter said, "How do you feel about that?" And she just kind of smiled and said, "We call that a public secret." In other words, it's supposedly secret, but the public knows the truth in the matter. And I really think the UFO situation is very similar to that. I think there's a lot of people, like the lady who called this evening, who have had experiences, who don't really know where to put them in their life experience because it's so unusual and it's so out of the box, so to speak, although she was definitely an educated person who could handle something that was out of the box. A lot of people have difficulty with that, and it's easy to intimidate people and to make them basically shut up about any experiences they really have. It's estimated by the individuals who have worked with abductees and also experiencers, people who have actually one-on-one kind of experiences with the extraterrestrials, that over 2% of the population has had some sort of direct experience with ETs. That would be 2% of 300 million, which is 6 million people. That's a lot of people to try to keep quiet. And also, this country is probably the one who's keeping it most secret. Many other countries, China and all the South American countries, accept the UFO existence. If there's a sighting, they put it in the newspapers and they call it what it is, a UFO. They don't pretend like it was something else. In Bolivia, they actually teach about UFOs in their school systems to their children. The Indians, or American Indians, have always talked about the star people as something that did definitely exist and has existed for thousands of years. It was part of their knowledge and their ceremonial ways of passing on information. So I mean, it's an incredible thing, and that's why I'm sitting here doing this. Actually, is because I think it's really important that people become aware of this, and I kind of believe the more people who open themselves to the possibility and look at this information, and I believe will be convinced that these other beings do exist and they are interacting with Earth, and in probably levels that were really hidden from us, but that the more of the human population that accepts this as a truth, the more likely the ETs will make themselves more present, and maybe more present in a sense to help direct us to clean up our mess, so to speak. I want to give you a little information about how you can reach me by email. I have an email address. It's gwnews2, that's the number 2, at yahoo.com. Also, I have a Facebook page by the same name, GWNews2, and on that Facebook page it's devoted totally to the UFO experience, and there's links to videos and to lectures and all kinds of information. So please email me if you have any suggestions about the show, or if you have any experience that you would like to relate. I'd really appreciate it, or any other information to speak of. And I'm going to leave you with that tonight, and look forward to talking to you next week. And I hope I get more callers, because that's really fun to have people call in about their experiences. Thanks to both the ladies who called. And as always, embrace the mystery. And I'm shutting down now.
Wait a minute, something wrong here. My key won't lock the door.